Hello again and welcome to the final part to the definitive guide series on running Strapi on Google Cloud Platform. I'm Kevin Blanco, your host, and in parts 1 and 2 we configure Google Cloud and our Strapi application for the deployment. Now in part 3 we're diving into the exciting world of continuous integration and continuous delivery, what's called CI/CD, with Google Cloud Build. This will automate our deployment process to ensure our Strapi application stays up to date and running in App Engine. So without further ado, let's get started. Alright, here I am in Google Cloud Platform, and just to recap, we have a Strapi application running on Google Cloud Platform. In case you missed it, part 1 and part 2, make sure to check those out. But long story short, we have here Strapi deployed to App Engine, and also there is a repository in my public GitHub where you can find everything we just deployed, including the Terraform files to deploy the whole architecture, and you can just clone it and start from there. Now we want to set up the continuous integration and continuous deployment. Now any real life project will have some sort of control in terms of how the code gets to production, a pull request procedure, releases procedures, continuous checks, etc. So normally we won't be deploying to App Engine manually, just like we did in the part 2. So in order to do that, we have a service on Google Cloud called Cloud Build. So let's actually go to Cloud Build. And here we will define our delivery pipelines. The first thing we need to do is actually connect our repository. So let's go to the left to the repository section, and let's actually connect our repository. I will definitely recommend using the second generation. Now the first generation is something that actually Google is starting to leave behind and moving everything to the second generation. So let's link our repository. We don't have a host connection yet. A connection is a connection between Google Cloud and your Git provider. In my case, it's going to be GitHub, but it could be others. So let's create a host connection. Let's define the region. Now it's really important, in case you didn't watch part 1 and part 2 videos, we've been using the US Central one for everything, like the App Engine, the database, the cloud storage, and I will definitely recommend that we use the same region also for the Cloud Build deployments. And let's give it a name to this connection. I'm just going to call it GitHub Kevin. And let's connect it. So this is going to take us to the actual GitHub authentication page. And here we will continue and select whether all the repositories or just one single repository. So let's actually install in a new account. So I'm going to select my actual account. In this case, it's going to be my personal one. And I'm going to define whether I want to have access to all repositories or only selected repositories. I'm going to say selected repositories, and then I'm going to find the repo that we created, which name was Strapi Google Cloud. Here it is. So that way, only from this repository, this connection will have permissions to actually deploy hooks or create automation scripts. So there you go. Now we have the actual connection in our second generation repository configured. So now that we have the host connection, we can actually link the repository. So let's select the connection we just created, and repository is going to be the only one we gave permissions to. But if you gave permissions to all of them, here you will select the ones you want to define for this repository linking. Repository name, you can select generated or manual. I normally keep it generated, and that's it. Now we have a connection and an actual link to that repository. So we're ready to configure a trigger. So the trigger is basically a mechanism that we respond to a given event. It could be a deployment to a new branch or a webhook, for example, and then we define the actions that are going to happen once that happens. So let's go to the create trigger here button, and let's create our first trigger. So the first thing is going to be the name. I'm going to call it Strapi on JCP, and then the region, remember that we have everything on the US Central 1 region. And now the description and the tags, it's up to you if you want to define the description and a tag. It's not required for now. Then the event that's going to be invoking this trigger for me is going to be a push to a branch. I want to, every time I deploy to the master branch, this deployment is triggered, but you can define push to a new tag, or a new pull request is created on GitHub, or a response to a manual invocation, a pops up message, or a webhook event. Now the source is the repository that we created a few minutes ago. So let's select second generation because that's where we created. Let's select the Strapi Google Cloud repository we created, and then the name of the branch that we want to, based upon this trigger, to be executed. Now, you can define anything in the form of a regular expression. So for me, it's going to be anything that matches the master branch name. But you can define, let's say, triggers for your development branch or your staging branch, what have you. That's up to you. But for me, it's going to be the master branch for this demo. And then the configuration of the build. How this build is going to be triggered. The first one is going to be the type. If you want it to happen based upon a cloud build configuration, in our case, since App Engine is based upon a cloud build configuration, then we definitely want to do it in that way. But if you're, for example, triggering a deployment to Google Cloud Run or a Kubernetes cluster, for example, you might want to be based upon a Docker file where you define an actual Docker file of your script to be executed. All build packs, that's another option. And then the location, where is this type going to be stored? Is the cloud build, in this case, is going to be under actual repository, or we want to define it inline? Those options work fine. So the same Docker file, if you're going to be based upon Docker, where is that Docker file being hosted? In the repository. And the same with build packs. I'm going to go back to cloud build, and I'm going to define an inline configuration YAML. We could put it in the repository, but it's easier for the sake of this demo to write it over here. So let's open the editor, and actually here we're going to be able to write our script. I have it here, let me paste it, and it's just one single step. It's actually very simple. The first thing is that we're going to be pulling the Cloud SDK image. So this image right here is going to be based upon the Cloud SDK, which has the G Cloud command line interface, which is what we need to deploy our application. Now, we really don't need to build a Strapi in the script process, because remember, on the step 2, we defined that in package.json, we have the JCP build step. So we really don't need to do anything in regards to the node.js build or etc. All happens at the deployment step. So all we have to do right now is actually just pull the Cloud SDK and say, hey, deploy our application. First, we do gcloud config set to actually define the timeout of this command to be in this milliseconds, and then gcloud app deploy app YAML, which is the same one we executed on the second step video, and then the project name, in this case, Kevin Blanco -appsmith. Now, this is all we have to do. Basically, this is going to be actually triggering when there is a new push to the master branch. This is going to be run, and since everything is already in the repository, we really don't have to do much. So let's actually save this. One advanced thing is that, for example, if you don't want the application environment variables to actually live in the repository, which is a great security practice, you can use substitution variable. So you have your app YAML file, but you don't have the actual values over there. You just use substitution variables, which is just an environment variable name. And then using this advanced feature, you will be able that on runtime for this cloud build step to actually swap the values from the secret manager or directly input it here. So on runtime, we replace the values with the actual secrets. That's a good practice, and normally that's the way I do it on my production projects. But for the sake of this demo and from a time standpoint, that could take time, and we can create a second step video on how to do this. But just wanted to let you know that the feature is there and you can use it. The last option, which is very important, is which service account are we going to be using? Remember that we have been using the default service account. So that's the same one we want to use, because on the first video, we gave this service account permissions to execute cloud build. So definitely we need to choose that one. If you want to use other one, make sure to give that service account the permission to execute cloud build scripts. So let's actually create this script. and we should be able to test it out. Let's actually test it out with a new commit that I have ready here. So in my local environment, I have a new content type that I created locally called event, and I have just very sample fields that I want you to see after we deploy with Google Cloud Build. This is the production one running on Google Cloud, and as you can see, there is no event content type. So that way we will see that, oh yeah, it did actually work. So in our code base, I have my push ready to deploy to the master branch. So I'm just going to do that. Enter my SSH key here. And there you go, there is a new deployment. So in theory, if I refresh here in GitHub, I should see my commit here. There you go. And now we see a pending status. That's because when we connected Google Cloud to GitHub, we can send data from Google Cloud to GitHub telling the status of our build. So if we go back to our dashboard, we should be able to see the first trigger is actually running. So how do we see that one? Let's go to the history on the left, and here it is. This one is running, and we can also see information about it, which trigger actually triggered this, and also the commit to this specific build that is happening. So if we click it out, we will see that indeed is the adding event content type commit we just did. So let's click the build name, and we should see the process of this build happening. So what's going to be happening first is that since we defined the Cloud SDK to be the base for this image step, that's what Google Cloud is going to be doing. It's pulling the Cloud SDK image to be used for this step. So right now that's what it's doing. In the first run, it's probably gonna take some more time because it's pulling the image and it's not cached, but for the following ones, they're going to be cached and it's going to be much faster. Okay, so we can see that right now it's in the process of deploying, and like I mentioned in the second video, once you deploy first the App Engine application and then you do a second or a following deployment, it's going to understand which files changed only, so we don't have to redeploy everything every time. So in this case, it's just uploading 8 files that changed from the previous deployment. Probably those 8 files are related to the event content type that I created on Strapi. So there you go, it's deploying right now, the file upload is done, and it's updating the service right now. It should be done in a matter of seconds. And it's done. If we scroll down, we will see the same confirmation message we usually get when we deploy it to App Engine, and it says the service is deployed and now we can test it out. So let's go to Strapi here in Google Cloud Platform. Let's refresh to get the latest changes. And now if we go to the content type builder, we should see the event content type, which is the new content type we just committed to GitHub. So we can now go to content manager and actually create a new event. So that's it. That actually demonstrates that the commit that we did from GitHub automatically deployed to Google Cloud using the Cloud Build scripts, which deployed to Google Cloud. So the whole change is completed. You're now enabled to go out and actually build this on your own. Alright, if you follow all 3 parts to now, you should have a production ready Strapi running in Google Cloud Platform, and you've earned it. You deserve the right to wear this. I'm extremely excited to hear your thoughts, so make sure to leave your comments and also subscribe to my channel for more tutorials like this. See you on the next one.